The courthouse buzzed with quiet expectation, attention humming beneath the polished wood panels and marble floors. Morning light poured through tall windows, casting long shadows on the tiled floor. A bailiff adjusted his tie at the double doors. Journalists shifted in their seats, sensing this might be more than a routine hearing. Detective Lucas Brandt walked in like he owned the place. His badge clipped to his belt. His boots echoing with confidence. He scanned the courtroom with the casual arrogance of a man used to being respected, or at least feared. To Brandt, this was another day, another defendant. Another black woman caught with a fake badge and a bad attitude. Another piece of paperwork to file before lunch. He tugged at his collar, barely concealing his smirk as he took his place near the prosecution table. His statement had been submitted. His testimony was locked in. She was going down. They always did. In the defendant's seat sat a woman named Mira Lane. Black. Mid-30s. Perfect posture. A calm expression that didn't match the situation. She was dressed not like someone on trial, but like someone leading a board meeting, navy blue suit, tailored to precision. No trembling hands. No darting eyes. Just stillness. Poise. Control. Too much control, Brandt thought. Judge Samuel Breyer entered with his usual gravel-voiced presence, settling into his chair with a slow breath that suggested he'd seen it all and cared very little about any of it. The charges were read aloud. Defendant Mira Lane, you are charged with impersonating a federal officer, obstruction of justice, and resisting lawful arrest. Do you understand the charges against you? I understand them clearly, Your Honor, Mira replied, her voice steady, polished, and unbothered. The murmurs started small. Whispers exchanged between the observers. Even the prosecutor, Raymond Knox, glanced over at her uneasily. Brandt crossed his arms. He had submitted airtight evidence. The badge was fake. He'd checked it himself. She'd tried to flash it during a stop and search, tried to play the intimidation game. But he'd been in this job too long. Seen too many people try too many tricks. This would be over in an hour. Tops. The judge flipped through her file, brow creasing slightly. Your arresting officer states you provided a badge identifying yourself as a special agent with the Federal Protective Bureau. He claims it was counterfeit. Is that correct, Detective Brandt? Brandt stood, confident. Yes, Your Honor. I confiscated it myself. I verified its serial number against federal records, came back flagged as fraudulent. The judge nodded slowly and turned to Mira. Miss Lane, do you have anything to say before we proceed to preliminary hearing? Mira's lips curled ever so slightly. Yes, Your Honor. I would like to provide clarity to the court, if I may. The judge gave a wary nod. Proceed. Without missing a beat, Mira reached into her blazer. A collective gasp passed through the courtroom like a ripple. The bailiff stepped forward, alarmed. Relax, Mira said coolly, pulling out a leather badge holder. She flipped it open. There it was. A golden badge, immaculate and unmistakably real. The engraved federal seal caught the light as if the truth had been waiting to shine. Dead silence. Judge Breyer blinked. Knox nearly dropped his pen. And Detective Lucas Brandt, for the first time in his career, felt a chill roll down his spine. What is this? The judge asked, leaning forward. The original badge I've carried for the past 8 years, Your Honor, Mira said smoothly. My real badge. My identity was never in question, until Detective Brandt decided to make it one. The courtroom erupted. Journalists whispered furiously. Phones were pulled discreetly beneath benches. Knox was already flipping through papers as if trying to find where everything had gone wrong. The bailiff took the badge and brought it to the judge. Breyer examined it carefully, his brow sinking lower with each passing second. This badge is authentic, he murmured. I've seen a few in my time. The ID matches. The clearance level. My God. Brandt's throat tightened. He stood slowly. She had a fake badge when I stopped her. This is some kind of trick. No, Detective, Mira said, locking eyes with him. You didn't check. You assumed. Then you arrested me unlawfully and submitted falsified paperwork to cover your tracks. That's not a mistake. That's misconduct. Her voice wasn't angry. It was surgical. Detective Brandt, the judge said sternly, did you take any steps to confirm the badge in question beyond visual inspection? I ran a number through the local system, Brandt stammered. It came back red. Red, Mira repeated, shaking her head. Because I work under a special division with encrypted ID protocols. Clearance you never had access to. She turned to the judge again. Your Honor, I've spent the past year undercover, investigating corruption in multiple precincts, including this one. Another wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. I was embedded under direct orders from the Department of Internal Oversight. I've documented unlawful stops, fabricated arrests, and internal cover-ups, all tied to Detective Brandt's unit. The judge stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. I have a complete file to submit to the court today, including audio recordings, time-stamped surveillance footage, and encrypted communications with federal supervisors. Brandt's hands curled into fists. "You're lying," he muttered, barely audible. "No, Detective," Mira said, standing now, her voice sharper. "I gave you every opportunity to treat me like a citizen. Like a professional. Like a human being. And you failed every time." The judge slammed his gavel. "Order. I will have order." Knox stood, hands raised. "Your Honor, I need a recess. I need to consult with my office." The judge nodded, looking dazed. "Granted." He turned to Mira. "Agent Lane, please approach the bench with your identification. We'll need to verify all your credentials." As she walked forward, Brandt stood frozen. Sweating. Silent. Mira passed him. She stopped just long enough to whisper without turning her head. "By the time this day ends, you'll wish you had read my file." The courtroom emptied quickly after recess was called, but the tension lingered like smoke from a smothered fire. Journalists huddled near the exit, whispering into phones, their eyes darting toward Mira Lane every few seconds. The judge had ordered a recess, but the story had already detonated. Agent Mira Lane, no longer the anonymous black woman wrongly accused, stood tall, a storm wrapped in calm. Her badge had been verified. Her credentials confirmed. Her story was about to upend careers, and Detective Lucas Brandt was at the epicenter of the quake. He sat alone on the courtroom bench, no longer relaxed, his eyes staring into some place far away. His tie was loosened now, one hand tugging at the knot like it might choke him. His attorney, a lean man with silver temples named Harlan Gage, finally slid into the seat beside him. "You have a hell of a problem," Gage said without pleasantries. Brandt didn't look at him. "They set me up." "No," Gage replied flatly. "You set yourself up? You didn't follow procedure. You brought a federal agent into court like she was a petty criminal. That alone could cost you your badge." She was acting suspicious. She had a fake identity. She had an alias, Gage corrected. Legally sanctioned. Bureau approved. Everything she did was by the book. Everything you did, wasn't. Brandt finally looked at him. "I didn't know." "That's not going to save you now." Back in the judge's chambers, Mira sat across from Assistant U.S. Attorney Nadia Flores, a woman who looked like she'd swallowed every headline from the last hour and still had room for more. "You understand the kind of fallout this creates?" Nadia asked, placing a manila folder on the table. Mira nodded. "I do. This doesn't just implicate Brandt. If what you're saying is true, this goes all the way to the top of the precinct. Maybe further." Mira placed a small flash drive on the folder. "Everything's on there. Body cam failures, ghost arrests, off-the-record stops. The pattern is clear." Nadia hesitated. "There's always a pattern, Agent Lane. But getting people to act on it? That's another story." "I'm not here to ask," Mira said calmly. "I'm here to finish what I started." Nadia exhaled. "You know what happens next, don't you? If this becomes public, they'll come after you. They'll drag your name through the dirt. Threaten your family. Maybe worse." Mira stared straight ahead. "They already tried." It started 3 months ago. Agent Mira Lane had been quietly reassigned to the Department of Internal Oversight after exposing a supervisor's falsified overtime records in a small Texas town. Instead of punishment, she was promoted, given a new directive: investigate high-frequency misconduct zones within metro precincts across the East Coast. One name came up repeatedly: Detective Lucas Brandt. Over the last 5 years, Brandt had arrested more young black men than any other officer in the region. His convictions were high. His paperwork was clean. Too clean. Complaints vanished. Video evidence conveniently corrupted. And his squad had a suspiciously high turnover rate. Rookies either transferred out quickly or learned to fall in line. The Bureau gave her the green light. Mira became Mira Brooks, a freelance legal assistant with a minor traffic violation history and a backstory that made her both unthreatening and visible. She moved into a neighborhood where Brandt's unit patrolled regularly. She dressed down, drove a dented Toyota, and played the part perfectly. And like clockwork, he came. He stopped her on a rainy Thursday. Claimed she'd rolled through a stop sign. When she protested, he threatened to tow her car. She kept calm. Flashed her fake badge, The one designed to trigger his overconfidence. He bit. She was cuffed and thrown into a cruiser within 5 minutes. No Miranda rights. No body cam. No backup. Exactly what she needed. What Brandt didn't know was that Mira was wired. Every word, every threat, every action was recorded. He never asked for verification. Never called it in. Never even checked the database. He saw a black woman with a badge and assumed she was bluffing. That assumption would cost him everything. Back in the courtroom, the second session resumed with fewer spectators but more tension. Judge Breyer looked older somehow, weighed down by the knowledge that what began as a routine arraignment might turn into the biggest departmental scandal in a decade. "Agent Lane," he said slowly, "we've reviewed the badge. Verified your employment status. You are, in fact, a senior operative with the Department of Internal Oversight?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And the alias used during your encounter with Detective Brandt was part of an authorized undercover operation?" "It was." Breyer sighed, then turned toward Brandt's counsel. "Mr. Gage, do you have a response?" Gage stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to request an immediate dismissal of all charges against my client." The courtroom paused. Mira didn't flinch. Breyer raised a brow. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that my client was not aware of Agent Lane's true identity and acted under reasonable suspicion based on the information available at the time." Mira leaned forward. "He fabricated the information." "Objection," Gage snapped. "Overruled," Breyer said tiredly. "This is no longer a simple hearing. It's a prelude to something much larger." He turned to Mira. "Agent Lane, is it your intention to formally file charges against Detective Brandt and submit your case to the Federal Review Board?" "It is." Breyer nodded grimly. "Then we're done here. All charges against the defendant are dropped. The court is adjourned." The gavel came down. Brandt stood up too fast, knocking his chair over. His face was flushed, eyes wild. "You don't get to do this," he barked at Mira. "You're just..." "Careful," Mira cut in, voice low but sharp as glass. "Because the next time you raise your voice in a courtroom, you might not walk out of it with your badge." She walked past him without a backward glance. Outside the courtroom, the press had multiplied. Cameras flashed. Microphones stretched like arms toward her face. "Agent Lane, is the department under full investigation? Is Detective Brandt being charged? Is this the beginning of a systemic purge?" Mira paused on the steps. The sky had clouded, a storm rolling in. "I can't answer all your questions yet," she said into the microphones. "But I will say this, today wasn't a victory. It was a warning." Then she disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind a courthouse no longer sure of its own integrity. The rain came down in sheets, washing over the city like it was trying to cleanse something foul. But no amount of rain could rinse out what Agent Mira Lane had just exposed. In a quiet hotel room on the edge of downtown, Mira sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by open folders, surveillance photos, and scribbled notes. Her laptop screen glowed with encrypted documents, timestamps, and internal memos from months of infiltration work. The television was on mute across the room, cycling through headlines. Breaking: Undercover Agent Unmasks Corrupt Cop in Courtroom Twist. Allegations of racism, abuse, and evidence tampering rock local precinct. Detective Lucas Brandt named in federal probe. Mira's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Another silent threat. She didn't pick up. Instead, she turned her attention to the center of the floor where a name, Captain Andrew Halstead, was circled in red marker. Lucas Brandt was the fall. Halstead was the root. The captain had built a fortress around himself, one Mira had only recently started to crack. Brandt wasn't operating alone. The excessive arrests, the planted evidence, the harassment, they were part of a culture that Halstead not only allowed but cultivated. He had made it profitable. Each falsified arrest added to his precinct's federal funding. Every high-risk zone report submitted increased surveillance budgets. Promotions, bonuses, political favors, they all flowed upward, and Halstead kept himself clean by letting men like Brandt do the dirty work. And Mira had the proof. Buried within financial logs was a pattern, one Mira had spent months assembling. Payments filtered through ghost accounts. Equipment signed out under one name and lost under another. Body cams ordered, delivered, then malfunctioned. But Halstead had one rule: no mistakes that made headlines. That's why Brandt was in trouble. He brought the storm to court and dragged Halstead's secrets into daylight. And now Halstead would retaliate. Meanwhile, in a smoky, high-rise office miles away, Captain Halstead stood with his back to the window, staring into the rain as if willing it to stop. His phone was pressed to his ear. His jaw tight. "You assured me this would never happen," he growled. On the other end, someone answered calmly, "No one expected her to be federal. Because you didn't check. Now she's a media darling, and Brandt is bleeding out in front of the cameras. Contain it." Halstead turned sharply. "She has the logs. She has the footage. She has names. You don't contain a grenade mid-explosion." A pause. "Then, make her disappear." Halstead hung up, his pulse pounding. He turned to the man sitting quietly on his couch, Detective Aaron Cho, internal liaison with a talent for cleaning up messes. "Find out who she talks to," Halstead ordered. "Get into her files. And if she steps outside protocol, use it." Cho nodded. "And if she doesn't?" Halstead's voice dropped. "Then we make something up." Back at the hotel, Mira was being watched. She knew it. Across the street, a white utility van had been parked for too long. Same van, different spot. No commercial markings. No deliveries. Too quiet. Mira didn't flinch. She moved differently now. Her routines changed daily. She left decoy devices and kept her real hard drives on her body or hidden where no one would think to look, under a loose tile in the floor of the women's shelter where she volunteered every Thursday. She wasn't just playing defense anymore. She was preparing for war. At the same time, Brandt was crumbling. He had been suspended, interrogated twice, and placed under restricted supervision. His name was on every news outlet. His past arrests were being reopened. But what haunted him wasn't the badge he'd lost. It was that Mira Lane hadn't blinked. She hadn't threatened him. She hadn't screamed. She'd simply watched. And he couldn't stop thinking about those eyes, calm, clear, knowing. She hadn't come to destroy his life. She'd come because he'd already done it himself. In his darkened apartment, Brandt stared at a folder Mira had dropped during the recess. At the time, he thought she'd left it behind by accident. Now, he wasn't so sure. Inside were photos. Of him. Of Halstead. Of the arrests. One in particular, a 15-year-old boy, black and barefoot, being pinned to the pavement in front of a bodega. Brandt remembered the case. The kid had stolen a granola bar. He'd cuffed him, slammed him onto the hood of the cruiser, and written it up as resisting. The charges were dropped later. The scars didn't drop with them. At the bottom of the folder was a note. "They made you believe this was justice. But deep down, you know it never was." Brandt crushed the paper in his hand. And for the first time, he felt it. Guilt. The following day, Mira met with Special Agent Ruben Ellis, her bureau handler. He was late 40s, wore scuffed boots and a permanent frown, but Mira trusted him more than most. "You're making enemies, Lane," Ellis said, setting down 2 black coffees on the cafe table. "Big ones." "I didn't join to make friends." Ellis gave her a look. "Halstead's people are scrambling. Surveillance on you has tripled. And rumor is, they're working on getting a warrant to raid your safe house. They won't find anything. That's not the point. They don't need to find something. They just need to say they did." Mira sipped her coffee. "Let them try." Ellis leaned in, lowering his voice. "They're setting you up, Mira. We intercepted a fabricated report this morning, a claim that you tampered with evidence during a previous investigation in Philly." Mira froze. "They're building a case. False complaints. Old photos. A sealed misconduct file from a suspect you arrested 5 years ago. They're going to make it look real." Mira's jaw tensed. "Then we go louder. We leak everything." "You leak it," Ellis corrected. "This is your story now." That night, Mira uploaded everything. Encrypted files. Depositions. Time-stamped video. Photos. Officer rosters. The full web from Brandt to Halstead to their political donors. She pressed send. First to Ellis. Then to 6 journalists who had earned her respect. And finally, to a cloud drive linked to a Deadman switch. If anything happened to her, it would all go public. She left one last file labeled, "In case you forget who this is for." Inside, just a photo of the boy from the bodega, bruised and crying, looking over his shoulder for help that never came. Mira stood by the window, watching the rain. Across the street, the white van was gone. But it didn't matter. Because she wasn't running. She was digging in. And the system had no idea how deep she was willing to go. It started with a knock that wasn't supposed to happen. 3 sharp raps on the door of Special Agent Ruben Ellis's office echoed down the corridor of the Bureau's Internal Oversight Division. He looked up from his paperwork, already annoyed. No one knocked. Not here. Not unless they had something that couldn't be written down. When the door opened, a man in a dark blue suit entered, calm, polite, unreadable. Ellis didn't recognize him. "Agent Ellis?" the man asked, stepping in like he owned the place. "Director Klein would like a word." Ellis's jaw clenched. Klein hadn't spoken directly to him in over 2 years. The director of the Eastern Division was the kind of man who let people hang themselves quietly. If he wanted a meeting now, something was unraveling faster than they could stitch it back. Across town, Mira Lane stepped into a dimly lit parking garage. She wasn't supposed to be here. Her real destination was 2 blocks away, a secured bureau storage unit containing physical evidence for the investigation against Captain Halstead and his inner circle. But Mira never took the direct route. She didn't trust that the bureau was fully on her side anymore. Not after what she'd learned that morning. Reuben had called her at sunrise. His voice was tight, urgent. "Your sealed file's been tampered with," he said. "They're trying to make it look like you falsified past investigations. Pulled an old misconduct case from 2019, one you closed cleanly." Mira didn't need to ask who they were. Halstead's reach extended into internal affairs now. He was pulling strings she didn't even know existed. And if he could access classified bureau files, it meant only one thing. Someone at the top was protecting him. Director Klein's office was silent, too clean. Ellis stood across from the massive desk while Klein poured coffee with slow, deliberate movements. "You've been working closely with Agent Lane," Klein said, not looking up. Ellis kept his voice neutral. "She's the lead investigator on the Brandt case, sir. Her undercover work built the foundation for the inquiry." "I'm aware." Silence. Then Klein finally met his eyes. "She's created a mess." Ellis didn't blink. "She exposed one." Klein's lips tightened. "We've received multiple formal complaints. Allegations of misconduct. Evidence mishandling. One of her old cases from Philadelphia is being reopened under suspicion." Ellis leaned forward. "All of which were planted. You know that. And so do I." Klein didn't respond. And that was his answer. Ellis stepped back. "You're going to hang her out to dry." The director's voice remained calm. "Agent Lane is drawing national attention. Political donors are calling. Congress is watching. She's become unpredictable. She's doing her job. She's doing it too well." A beat of silence passed before Ellis said, "If you're not going to protect her, I will." Klein's eyes narrowed. That would be a career-ending choice. Ellis straightened his tie. "Then I hope it ends loudly." At the bureau storage unit, Mira accessed locker 8B, her keycard shaking slightly in her grip. Inside were 2 hard drives, 1 flash drive, and a sealed envelope labeled "Backdoor, Halstead OPS." She barely had time to examine them before her phone buzzed with a coded alert. "Movement detected. Unauthorized surveillance breached." Someone had accessed the bureau's encrypted server remotely, someone without clearance. Someone looking for her. Mira didn't panic. She didn't even flinch. She took out her own burner laptop and started tracing the IP address. It didn't lead to the precinct. It led to a government office building on the outskirts of DC, a location not officially listed on any federal registry. The bureau wasn't just compromised. It had been infiltrated. Reuben Ellis called her from a different number 30 minutes later. "They're shutting it down," he said. "All of it. The task force, the investigation, everything. They can't. They are. They just pulled your authorization. Said your evidence can't be used due to procedural bias. They're erasing you, Mira." Mira sat on the bench outside the storage unit, the envelope resting on her lap. "What about the press?" she asked. Ellis hesitated. "A gag order was filed this morning. Someone's pulling federal judges into this now. Even Kessler can't get it printed." A chill ran through her. They weren't just silencing her. They were erasing the story. Scrubbing the truth. Unless she moved now. Unless she made it impossible to cover up. 2 hours later, Mira walked into the only place left that hadn't turned its back on her, Station 17, a grassroots media outlet run out of an abandoned post office downtown. The editor, Jordan Baez, was already waiting. She'd once covered a school abuse scandal that cost a senator his seat, and she owed Mira a favor from years ago. "You bring hell with you every time you walk through my door," Jordan said, locking the entrance behind her. "Today's no different." Mira handed over the envelope. "This isn't just police corruption. This is federal. People at the top are protecting monsters." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "You ready to go scorched earth?" Mira nodded. "I want this everywhere. Dark web. Encrypted forums. News networks. Doesn't matter. I want it impossible to contain." Jordan glanced at the files. "You realize once this hits, you can't come back from it." "I'm not trying to come back." By nightfall, the world began to shake. A link surfaced on Reddit with the headline, "Corruption in Blue, a federal agent's testimony." Within an hour, it had 20,000 shares. Then 100,000. Then it hit Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Telegram. Videos of brand planting evidence. Memos from Halstead's office outlining quota-based arrests. Bank transfers to offshore accounts traced to political PACs. And audio of Mira being told, by Director Klein himself, that she was a liability to the Bureau's image. The truth was out. There was no going back. Inside the Bureau, Director Klein watched the news reports flood in. He slammed his mug against the wall. Someone had leaked internal files from a supposedly offline server. He knew who it was. And for the first time in his long, quietly corrupt career, he didn't know how to bury it. As the storm broke across the nation, Mira sat quietly on a rooftop, watching the skyline. Helicopters buzzed in the distance. Headlines scrolled across giant screens in the city center. She didn't smile. Didn't cry. She just breathed. Because the truth wasn't a weapon. It was a wildfire. And she had just lit the match. 3 days after the leak, the nation boiled. Mira Lane's name dominated headlines, not as a rogue agent or a suspect in a courtroom sting, but as a whistleblower, a truth teller, a disruptor of a system long corroded from the inside out. Every news station, podcast, and social media feed buzzed with dissected fragments of her case, the footage of the 15-year-old boy being brutalized, the spreadsheets that outlined racial quotas for arrests, and the chilling audio of federal leadership calling her a liability to optics. There were protests in 5 cities by noon. By evening, 11. No one could unsee what she'd uncovered. And no one could silence it now. Yet Mira remained invisible. Not hiding. Just moving. She'd left the hotel 2 days ago. She didn't return to her apartment. Instead, she hopped from one safe location to another, old colleagues' basements, community shelters, a church rectory. Each step was deliberate, each stay brief. Because somewhere out there, retaliation was moving like a snake through tall grass. Someone wanted her gone. Not fired. Erased. Meanwhile, Director Klein stood in front of the Joint Oversight Committee in Washington, D.C., sweat beading behind his collar despite the coolness of the room. Director Klein, Senator Hartwell said, voice steady, "Do you deny the existence of a coordinated effort within the Bureau to suppress whistleblower activity and discredit Agent Mira Lane?" Klein cleared his throat. There was no official directive. Mistakes may have been made at the lower levels." Respectfully, Hartwell interrupted, "Agent Lane's recordings place you directly in conversation with internal counsel, discussing how to contain her. That audio was taken out of context." Hartwell leaned forward. "Is that your final answer?" Klein paused. It didn't matter anymore. Whatever he said, the fire was already burning. In a small living room on the south side of Baltimore, Mira sat beside Jordan Baez and 2 trusted members of a civil liberties watchdog group. Maps, documents, and digital tracking data lay sprawled across the table. "We've identified 6 more precincts with the same pattern," Jordan said. "Same funding cycles. Same suppressed complaints. All tied to Halstead's people." Mira nodded slowly. "It's not just about Halstead anymore. This was a blueprint. Then we exposed the whole machine." Mira leaned back, fatigue woven into every joint in her body. Her eyes were sharp, but there was an ache in them, a weight no headline could carry. "This is going to get darker," she said. "There are people with power and reach. And they're watching." Jordan didn't blink. "Then let them." Reuben Ellis had been suspended. Officially, it was a pending internal review. Unofficially, it was a punishment for loyalty. But Reuben wasn't out of the game. Operating out of a borrowed garage 2 counties over, he compiled a secure evidence database for the public inquiry. Old case files, private memos, whistleblower statements, all filtered and time-stamped. And he wasn't alone. More agents had started coming forward. Some in whispers. Some loudly. It wasn't just Mira anymore. She'd cracked the dam. And the water was rushing in. At dawn, Mira received a message on her encrypted burner. "Meet me. Parking deck. 6th and Alder. Alone." The number wasn't saved. But the signature was unmistakable. Brandt. She stared at it for a long time. He had no reason to reach out, no leverage, no redemption to gain. But something in her gut said go. Not because she trusted him. But because he might be the last thread in the knot. The deck was empty. A breeze moved between the concrete pillars, soft but biting. Mira kept her coat zipped and her hand near her concealed weapon. Just in case. Then he appeared. Lucas Brand. Less polished, more worn. He looked older in only a matter of days. Like the weight of his past had finally caught up. "I didn't think you'd come," he said, hands in the air to show he wasn't a threat. "You're lucky I did." Brand approached slowly. "They came to me yesterday. Said if I gave them something on you, anything, they'd cut a deal." "And did you?" "No." Mira raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" He laughed dryly. "Because I'm already in hell." "But you burned it down." He had pulled something from his coat. "A thumb drive. I kept backups," he said. "I thought I was covering myself. But I saved more than I realized. Notes. Texts. Names." Mira took it without a word. "There's one name you haven't hit yet," he added. "Judge Evelyn Sharp. She fast-tracked the warrants. Knew they were junk. Took payouts from Halstead's people." Myra's expression didn't change. "I figured. Maybe helping now means something." She nodded slowly. "It's not redemption. But it's a start." Brand looked away. "I don't want redemption. I just want it to stop." Mira turned to leave, then paused. "It doesn't stop," she said. "But we changed the direction." 2 nights later, in a packed press conference on the steps of the D.C. courthouse, Mira Lane stood beside 2 U.S. senators, 3 federal agents, and a group of people once too afraid to speak. A banner behind them read, "No more silence." Mira took the podium last. "No notes. Just fire. This isn't about one bad cop. Or one broken system. It's about silence. The kind we're trained to ignore. The kind we're taught to fear. And I say no more." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The only reason corruption survives is because good people get tired. Because justice is heavy. Because speaking out comes with a cost. She looked out at the sea of faces, angry, hopeful, trembling, alive. "Let it cost me," she said. "Because it won't cost another kid in cuffs. It won't cost another family justice. And it won't cost another truth to rot behind closed doors." The applause didn't erupt. It rolled. Like thunder. That night, Mira walked alone down 9th Street, her coat billowing in the wind. The lights of the courthouse still glowed behind her. She didn't carry a weapon. She didn't need to. Because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't running. She was being followed. Not by enemies. But by change. And it had her name on it.